Now we're going to be doing two melachot, gozez and melaben. We finished with bishul. Depending how much time we have, we may not be able to do all of melaben, so B'ezrat Hashem will continue 2 weeks from now. Next week there will not be a shiur. Gozez appears to be familiar to us because we've already discussed kotzer. Kotzer means to cut down the wheat in the field. We discussed the very first melachot that have to do with the preparation of the bread, whether it was harvesting the wheat, cutting it down, assembling it, threshing it, winnowing it, and then of course grinding it. Then we had the melacha of kneading it, the preparation of making the dough, and then the process of baking and cooking. We are beyond that. Now we're holding at the point of melachot that what they have in common is that they deal for the most part with garments. There are quite a few melachot that deal not with cooking or baking, with food, they deal with garments. So gozez means to cut, but it's not kotzer, the type of cutting that we discussed when we spoke about kotzer, the wheat. It's gozez semer. It's the shearing of the wool. But as you will see, out of this gozez, there are quite a few applications. It does not necessarily involve wool, but it still falls under the category of the av melacha of gozez, or as they toldah. Toldot are those melachot, those things that are prohibited that resemble the original melacha and are just as a sur. And then there are those applications that may not be prohibited by the Torah, but they are at least prohibited by rabbinical agreement with Rabbanan. So what is gozez? Gozez means to uproot or to cut away anything from a living being, whether you use a keli, a tool, or in some cases even if you were to use your hand. That which is attached to a living being, even if that living being is now dead, an animal that is now dead, it would be prohibited to remove or to uproot the hair, for example, the wool from that animal, even though now it's dead. This all is called gozez. So this melacha was done with wool, the preparation of the many things that required wool in the Mishkan. Where does this apply today? Well, it still applies to the wool on the sheep, but it also applies to gzizat se'ar. It applies also to cutting one's hair. One cannot cut one's hair according to the Torah, of course, using the keli, the scissors. But even to use your hands, you cannot use your hands, especially if the way one removes hair, or a particular hair, is ordinarily done with the hand. When would you use your hand and not use a scissor? If you're plucking out the white hair from the black. So, in reality, yes, you would require scissors to be over the isur midoraita. That's the way it's done, and it's not done by hand. But if what is being done, like the eyelashes or eyebrows, if somebody plucks at them, or plucks out the white hair from a black hair because he doesn't like the white hair, doesn't like people seeing him, that he's getting old. Right, so that's lisha. Or akira is a form of gozez, and it would be asur even midoraita to do so on Shabbat, to pull out a hair, a white hair. One has to be careful on Shabbat, of course, not to do that. Even though he's using his hands, it's at least asur midrabanan. Not really, yeah. It's at least gozez. So levanot mishchorot, plucking out the white from the black, would be an example of even using your hand would be possibly asur midoraita to do. Another example of where this may be applicable is a fur coat, me'id parva, I wrote. Fur coat is made out of fur, which is made from animals. Whether it's from a fox or some other animal, the animal is gone, the animal is dead. Why would you want to pluck out hair? Well, not necessarily you don't want to pluck out the hair intentionally, but you may want to clean it from all sorts of little animals or dirt that may be in there. And by doing so, especially if you're using a brush, but even without a brush, you may come to uproot a hair. And this is a hair from what was once a living animal, so it would also be asur for you to pluck it out or to do something that may result in plucking out a hair from a me'id parva, from a fur coat. Okay, all of these are not very common possibly, but it's just important for us to get the idea of what's involved. Now we come to the more common application, and that is combing of one's hair. Okay, a lot of people want to comb their hair, especially the women. They want to look nice on Shabbat. Well, they want to look nice the whole week too. But on Shabbat, it poses a problem because if you use a comb, whether it's for a man or a woman, it may come to the problem of gozez. Now, even though that's not your intention, and that you may consider davar she'eno mitkaven. Davar she'eno mitkaven is not asur. You don't intend to do so. It's like, remember we spoke about walking in grass. It's not asur to walk on grass, even though you may come up to uproot the grass, because atalo mitkaven, you do not have the intention to uproot the grass. So here too, I don't intend. The problem is that sometimes you run into a situation called psik reshe. Psik reshe means to cut off the head. It is an example that the rabbis use. Is it possible to cut the head of a chicken, and the chicken will not die? No. If you cut off the head, it's going to die. So here, if you use a certain type of comb, you're gonna uproot hair. It's just gonna happen. Which combs are we talking about that are the most problematic? The dense ones, the ones that the teeth of the combs or the brushes, right, are very dense, right? Or they go in very deep, close to the scalp. And therefore, by using them, one can very easily come to uproot a hair, and that would be gozez. So therefore, I put down over here what the conditions of using a comb on Shabbat are. If you want to, whether you're a man or a woman, and you need to look well kempt, you want to look good, it's okay, it's permissible, as long as you have in mind 2 or 3 conditions and how to do so. Condition number 1, which is the most important condition, is that the only type of brush or comb you can use is one that is raka. Has very soft hair, not the hard ones. You know what I mean by a soft brush? That as soon as you brush yourself, the hairs bend. What? Right. No soft bristles. Right. Like camel's hair. Right. Something like that. Right. That should not be able, hopefully, to cause a problem of gozez. Another important condition is adinut. In other words, you have to do it gently. Right? You can't do it harshly, because even with this, you may come to uproot the hair. Now, if you know that every little movement, even with the soft brush, will take out hair, then you can't use it. Right? Because if your hair just falls off very easily, then you'll have a problem. So you can't even use that. But this is the basic criteria, of how to comb yourself on Shabbat. There are those who hold that there's a third criteria, and that is that you should designate that brush is used on Shabbat. It shouldn't appear that you're doing something that you do during the week, you're doing it also on Shabbat. But it's not a prohibition. So you designate a brush, this is the brush to use on Shabbat. There are other brushes that may not be exactly like these, but are not dense, and you may be able to use it if you're careful. The main thing to remember when brushing yourself is that you have to be extremely careful, because it could easily happen depending on the type of hair you have. And with women, of course, and with long hair, you also have the problems of nas, which you for sure can run into a problem. So that is one of the applications of gozez that is quite common, that you come across almost about every Shabbat if you use a comb or a brush. Now, what about removing lice? In removing lice, you have 2 situations. There are 2 problems, 2 things to look at. The actual lice itself, the killing of the lice, removing of the lice, and how to do so with the special combs. Well, the news is as follows. You cannot use the special combs for lice. You know those special metal combs? Because those are the exact type of combs that we were talking about that cause the greatest problem for the hair. They're very, very dense. The space is very small. And if you use them to remove lice, which you are allowed to, by the way, on Shabbat, you're allowed to remove lice on Shabbat, but if you use those combs, you're going to be removing your hair too with the lice. So that's called gozez. So you cannot, if you need to remove lice on Shabbat, you cannot use that comb that you would ordinarily use. So what do? How do you remove lice on Shabbat? If you need to, 1 hair at a time. You pull the hair and you use your fingers. You go up from the bottom to the top. So 1 second. Guess what? Lice is one of the only things on Shabbat you're allowed to kill. Isn't that interesting news? No. We'll talk about eventually, I think, when we talk about, I can talk about it briefly now. Lice is a different type of creature. Right? The way it's formed, there's no zerah, there's no decree by the rabbis on it as far as killing it, or removing it, or trapping it. Same things that we have with bugs, worms, or other animals that you cannot harm, or hunt, or catch, does not apply to lice. That's pretty much the only one, right? Yes, you can even smash them, throw them in the water or whatever. Right? But you have to be careful not to remove lice on your clothes, because then you may run into other little bugs that might be there, and you may kill them. Those you're not allowed to. But if you have them on the hair, and of course they bother you, right, you're allowed to remove them on Shabbat, from the hair. From the hair you're allowed to remove them on Shabbat, but use your fingers, use your hands. Don't use that special comb that is used during the week that, moves through the hair very, very well. No, it has nothing to do with pikuach nefesh. Lice, is the only birya, the only creature, because of the way it's formed. It's not formed in the normal, natural way for a male and female. That's the way it's explained in the halakha. That is a very unique form of creation, and there might be some similar features to that too. But the ones that we deal with on a daily basis, this is the only one. But this is the only one that we deal with, that we may come across with, that we may have a problem with. Bugs and other animals are quite different in the way they form. So you can remove it only from the hair, not from the clothes, from the hair, but you cannot use that special brush because of the problem it poses for gozez. You may come to uproot a hair. And since the chances are high that you will, you can't do it, right? Because of psikar means that it's for sure going to happen. Well, with certain combs you're going to for sure remove hair, then you can't do it. So you have to use your fingers. Well, you'd be surprised, depending on the type of comb. You have to know yourself, depending on the comb you use, depending on the type of hair you have. Some combs are for sure going to uproot a hair. You can't use them. Others not. But for as far as removing lice, you can remove them, but you need to use your hands. This could be a problem for a woman who needs to go to the mikveh, we're going to talk about that, we'll talk about nails too. Some say that a woman needs to, of course, remove the lice from the hair before she goes to the, just like she has to do any other hatita, any other obstruction, like knots in the hair and the like. Some say she doesn't have to be as concerned if there's no other way for her to remove the lice, and she has to go to the mikveh Friday night. She can go with the lice. I don't think other people are going to appreciate that, but a woman who needs to go Erev Shabbat should prepare herself before Shabbat. That's the right way to do things. Not to be negligent, but to do all the preparations. There might be some that she may not make. She may not, in other words, make it on time, and we'll talk about that next. We'll talk about nails. Yeah. Oh, Baruch Hashem, thank you for the information. You heard there's a special shampoo that takes away lice. That's it. Very easy. Very good. Shampoo is better not to use on Shabbat. Right. There's other problems that may come out as a result of the shampoo, depending on the type of shampoo, the lathering effect. No, getting the hair wet is not a problem. You can wet your hair. You can wet your hair on Shabbat. What? You can't squeeze the hair. Yeah, it's a form of, it's like, yeah.
You can dry your hair.
You can dry your hair.
Dry your hair? No, with a towel.
Yeah, you just have to be careful of skita, which we'll talk about later. Not squeezing out the towel. So if you wet it too much, it may be a problem. But there's no issue prohibition to wet the hair. So if somebody wants to wet his hair, his or her hair, for some good reason, you're allowed to. Is that dry? Sure. Well, you don't want to come to gozes. So if you do it too roughly, move the hair too roughly, that may be a problem too. Okay, so knots in the hair. Knots in the hair is a more complicated problem. A woman that needs to go to the mikveh Friday night, and by the way, there is a mitzvah, we spoke about it, we spoke about family purity, there's a mitzvah to go on time, as much as possible, unless there's a very good reason that the woman cannot make it that, to the mikveh that night, she's allowed to push it off. It must be a good reason. So Friday night is the time, you don't push it off, she may go to the mikveh as usual, even though the mikveh is warm water, and we're not allowed to take a shower or bath in warm water on Shabbat. For mikveh, it's okay. She's allowed to immerse herself as long as she made all the preparations before Shabbat. There are quite a few preparations that require some melachot, perhaps, before Shabbat. One of them is removing the knots in the hair. That's very important part of the preparation before going to the mikveh. That's very important. Let's say she forgot, or she didn't have time. What do you do now? It may be a big problem. She may not be able to go to the mikveh that night. She may have to push it off. This is one of those situations which is a big problem, because there's everybody agrees she cannot enter the mikveh if she has knots in it. And how is she going to remove the knots now? If she uses a comb, she's going to tear her hair. That's going to be gozes. To ask a goya to do so is not so simple either, because the hair is not similar to the next we will see. She forgot to cut her nails. She may be able to ask a goya. With the hair, it's going to be an issue of deoraita. To cut the hair is forbidden according to the Torah. You just can't ask a goy to do anything for you that is forbidden in the Torah, right? So it poses a big problem. The best thing to do is, of course, prepare yourself before, so you don't run into this problem. In case a woman did forget, the di'avad shebedi'avad, in other words, there was an emergency, something happened out of the ordinary, she did forget, she may ask a goya to help her out with it. There are some rabbinic authorities that allow it. But it all depends on the situation. I don't want to give you a blanket statement, in other words, it's permissible to use because it's more problematic than the situation involving me. So if this ever comes up, one needs to consult with the rabbi. We don't just allow it. Because we don't just allow you to ask a goy to do anything, even though it's a mitzvah to go to the mikveh. Of course, here it's a little bit different. There are some opinions that hold you may ask a goy, and that is why it's permissible, the di'avad. Alright, what about a wig? Women wants to comb the wig on Shabbat. The wig is not part of an animal. It was never part of a living thing. Even if it's human hair, it makes no difference right now. It's not connected, attached to a living. There's no isur doraita. In a sense, the Torah, as far as gozes is concerned, to comb a wig. Even though by combing the wig, you may come to a proof. However, that's not accurate either. Even though it's true that it may not be gozes, some rabbis say it's a sur, or you have to be very careful to apply the same rules we applied by using a brush on your own hair, because even though it may not be gozez, it may come under a different category, a different melacha of korea, tearing, because ultimately this hair is attached to something, right? And tearing is a sur, except for certain situations where tearing is permissible, but just the tear is a sur. So therefore, one has to be careful, even when combing one's wig, to use the same criteria that you use when combing your hair. Yeah, b'di'avad means as a last resort. That's not a correct translation. In other words, it was unintended. It's not an ideal situation. There's lechatchila ideally as a first choice, b'di'avad as a second choice. There's no other alternative. Right. After the fact. Right. What? There's no right if you use a good comb. So there's no issue, there's no problem with that. As long as you use a good comb, there's no chance that you will come to uproot a hair, then it should be permissible. I think eventually, with Hashem, I don't want to talk about all about wigs now. There are other issues about wigs, about the sprays on the wigs, about the rollers. Those are other problems that you don't do on Shabbat for other reasons. Right now, we're only dealing with gozez. So we'll talk about Hashem. Otherwise, we're mixing many melachot together. Right now, we're talking about gozez, which is uprooting, not tearing, and not cutting, but uprooting, in a sense, something that was attached to a living being. And when it comes to wigs, it's not a living being. It's not exactly a sul because of gozez, but it can be possibly a sul because of korea or other similar melachot. So you have to be careful with wigs as well. Okay, so what do you do? With mastic base'ar. Okay, somebody got some mastic, some gum on his hair. Anybody have any ideas what to do? I just discovered how to do it. I never knew how to take care of mastic, or how to effectively remove gum other than cutting the hair. Yeah, but the problem is, remember, now we have two problems now. We have the gum in the hair, which is how do you remove it without cutting the hair? A girl doesn't want her hair cut, right? Especially if it's a lot, right? Boy may not mind as much. Now you have the problem of doing it on Shabbat. So if cutting the hair was not a problem, you could do it, but we're talking about Shabbat. So how do you deal effectively with gum in the hair on Shabbat? Exactly, how did you know? Baruch Hashem. You have many years of experience. You probably had a lot of gum in your hair, no? Baruch Hashem, right? If you apply a cold compressed ice on the gum for a little while, it will harden. And after it hardens, it comes off easily. It shrinks, and then you can easily take it off without tearing the hair. Because you have to be careful here about the hair. You don't want to tear the hair right? So what do? Put ice. If you apply ice to the gum, it hardens, and after it has hardened, it's easier to take off. Yeah, as far as gum is concerned. Another idea that you could use for gum is oil. If you smear oil on it, you are softening it. It becomes more liquefied, it becomes easier to remove too. These two you can do on Shabbat, and you can do during the week too, because they will help you much easily and much faster remove the gum that's there. Yeah. So you have to be careful if you're cleaning it from bugs or from anything there. That you can't do that on Shabbat because you may come to pluck out a hair. From a fur coat, it's also prohibited. No, it was a living animal. It's part of a living. It was a living being. No. With human hair, for example, it's detached. Even if it's a wig of human hair, it's not a problem. But with the fur coat, it's a problem. So you have to be careful not to use a brush to remove any bugs that might be there. Removing dirt is another problem, which we're going to talk about next. Here, I didn't talk about removing dirt. It was just removing bugs. By whatever you're doing to remove, you may come to pluck a hair out. You have to be careful. That's correct. So, because the gozez applies to any living being. Even if that living being is now dead, it will also be asur. Okay, next item is tachboshet. If you have a band-aid that you want to remove on Shabbat, why would you want to remove a band-aid on Shabbat? Well, either because of netilat yadayim, even though you're allowed to wash in a sense. You need the band-aid there, you can wash the band-aid, you don't have to worry about it. But it's disturbing you, it's painful, right? What happens when you remove band-aids? You may be removing some of the hair that's underneath it. No hair. No. It's mostly a problem with the hair. It's a very good chance that some of the hair will come off when you remove the band-aid. So, you wait till after Shabbat, if that's the case. If at all possible, if you can't easily remove the band-aid without plucking out the hair, you just wait till after Shabbat. Or, if it's a real problem, you really want to, for some good reason, remove it, it's bothering you, ask a goy. No problem whatsoever asking a goy to do so. Or, do something that was similar to do with gum. Moisten it with something that will loosen it up. Then it will easily fall off. Otherwise, you have to be careful with band-aids because of the problem of gozez too. Even though you don't intend to do so, there's a good chance that some hair may come out. Therefore, you have to, be careful. Yeah. Well, just around the tachboshet, that's a different problem. We spoke a little bit about it in the past. But there are certain ointments you can't use on Shabbat, certain creams, certain ointments. Right, we'll get to that eventually. What can you put on your hands on Shabbat or on your face? When we talk about makeup, talk about ointments, there's various problems. Just a little bit of oil is not a problem. The only problem that can be with certain oils would be a problem that is related to refuah, to medication. And that is a problem not with the oil itself, the smearing, but with the medication. But if it's not an issue of medication here, then it can be permissible, depending. Right, it can be permissible. there are ways to do it. There are ways to use it, depending what it is. Oil is not as a problem as some of the creams are. Right, exactly. Sure. Yeah. B'ezrat Hashem, I'd rather cover it when we talk about the various ointments and creams instead of introducing it right now. Okay, next item is sipornaim, fingernail. We have two types of fingernails, those on our hands and those on our toes. And there is a little bit of a difference between them. On Shabbat, you cannot remove a fingernail. It's a sur b'doraita because of gozez to remove it with the scissors or with a clip. You cannot use that on Shabbat. But midrabanan, it's also sur to remove it whether you're biting it or whether you're using your hands. Sometimes it's very tempting, but you have to control yourself as much as possible not to bite your nails, even during the week. It's not nice, right? Or on Shabbat, of course, because it's at least a sur midrabanan, whether it's biting, using your mouth, or whether it's using another finger, your hand, to remove the nail. So midoraita, it's a sur because of gozez to use the actual keli. Midrabanan, whether using your hand or using your mouth. However, if most of the nail is already off and you're a little bit in pain, then you can just take off the rest of it. That would be permissible because it's very similar, right? Let's say most of the nail is already off. Sometimes most of it on its width is off, and you're in pain, right? It's a little painful, and most of it is off. You're allowed to remove it with your hand, not with a clip, of course, but with your hand or biting it. That's a good point. Not with a clip, but with your hand or biting it. Why is that permissible? Because first of all, you're in pain, right? And most of it is off, so it's like completely detached. So because of those two reasons, you're allowed to remove. However, let me just finish with the next situation. What happens if somebody has an ingrown toenail? Ingrown toenail. The toe, how sometimes it's ingrown. It could be very, very painful. It could be tough. It could be a problem. Well, you can't use the scissors. You can't use anything to remove that ingrown toenail yourself. What do? That's one of those situations where you would be able to use the goy. But you cannot do anything to remove. Well, nails in itself, you don't want to have your nails grow too much. For men especially. For women, it's part of the beauty of a woman to let her nails grow. But for men, they should keep it as short as possible. Shochatim and mohalim leave one nail. You may have noticed that there's a shopet or a mohel. May you leave one nail that's longer because he needs it for his job. Yeah, that's, he uses that. But otherwise, you want to keep it as short as possible. That, the tum'ah usually rests on the extremity, but tzavot, right? That's why the fingers are the most important part of the hand that should be washed in the morning. Okay. Not even if you didn't do the rest of the hand, it's okay, as long as you got the finger till the knuckles. All right. So a woman who forgot to cut her nails before Shabbat, she's going to the mikveh. That is one of the things women do. They take off if they use nail polish and it's not fresh that they put on that day. It's already old nail polish that's coming off. So to remove it. That's why some women don't want to bother with it and don't use nail polish. But I don't think that's a good enough reason. Don't be lazy. Use the nail polish and just remember to take it off. Right? Exactly. Now, so that needs to be removed before Shabbat. The nails need to be cut. Why should the nails be cut? Because they can't be dirt. So that's the problem of chatzitza. You don't want to have obstructions in the mikveh. So that's customarily part of the preparation the woman does besides immersing herself in a hot bath, removing the knots, cleaning herself, cutting her nails, removing the nail polish. Let's say she didn't cut her nails before Shabbat. She may ask a goy. With nails, she may ask a goy to cut her nails for her on Shabbat. No problem with that. With the knots, we said it was a little more problematic. With the nails, it's not so much of a need. However, let's say you're in a place where there are no goyim. Where is there a place where there are no goyim? Let's say you are, in Bnei Brak. Now, even in Bnei Brak, you may be able to find a goyim. But let's say in a place where there's no goyim, right? What do? She cannot go to the mikveh? No. She's allowed to go to the mikveh even with the nails uncut, as long as she cleans those nails very well underneath. That's the biggest problem with the nails, is the dirt inside, underneath it. So you want to remove it, you want to be careful so you don't puncture yourself and get blood out, right? But the woman should clean her nails very, very well before she goes to the mikveh. And then she can go with the nails to the... What? No, I didn't say with the nail, just to be careful not to puncture. The dirt should be removed from underneath the nails, because that's the biggest problem here, not the nail itself. Yeah. Right? No, don't worry about it. There are times that women should be careful not to go to the cemetery, but it has nothing to do with it. What? For example, when a woman is pregnant, better not to. There are certain times that some people have the custom to be careful of those times not to go. But I don't want to mix the subject right now. Another time we can discuss that. But that is one example, right? The one I just gave you. Nothing to do with nails, as far as I know. Okay, so we just talked about how one can use a goy if the woman forgot to go to the mikveh. That's only with her fingernails, not with toenails. With toenails, the custom is to just clean them well and not cut them. Not worry about them so much. Not worry about the toenails as much as about the fingernails. Right. Okay? Okay, let's go on. I think we're ready to go on to the next melacha. Melaben. Yeah. Oh, it's not a sum midoraita. You have to be careful on Shabbat not to bite. By the way, before we go to melaben, when we talk about cutting nails, it does not only mean the nail. It also means anything around the nail. Skins, right? Well, how do you call that?
Cuticles.
The cuticles, yeah. You have to be careful with that too. That's the same thing as a nail. It makes no difference whether it's skin or whether it's nail. You can't remove that. What? Pulling. Yeah, thanks. Yeah. Okay, let's go to melaben. Melaben means to wash, cleanse, what? Whitening. But that's what the word appears to mean, whitening. But what it really means is to remove the dirt of the we're dealing with shearing the wool of the sheep. What would be the next step after you shear the wool? It's called scoring it. Scoring or scouring. S-C-O-U-R. Scouring. Okay? Right. I'm going to get to that. Removing that dirt, because remember that fleece or that wool on the sheep is full of dirt, grease, and all sorts of other things. It's not white. It's not clean. It's not ready to be used, right? The first step in the process of preparing the wool, scouring it or bleaching it. Okay. In other words, removing what is happening at this stage is the dirt is being removed. How? By usually putting it in vats full of water or chemicals or both. And in that process of either running water or even if the water is standing, if you soak the wool of the sheep inside the water, after a certain amount of time, that water has the ability to scour or to remove the dirt from the wool. And it's basically cleaning the wool. That's called melaben. That's a sur on Shabbat. And according to the Rambam, the actual sur is not removing of the dirt in itself, but it's the kibus, or the libun, the whitening, what we would call today bleaching. So the Rambam considers the av melacha of melaben really the bleaching of it, which today is a process that involves chemicals, not just water, which destroys a certain amount of dirt that's there, it disintegrates it, and later you remove it, and it makes the wool white. That process is called libun. Regardless, either one is the av and the other one is the tolada, or the other way around. The actual av is the soaking and removing of the dirt. They're both asur. The only one that is not exactly asur d'oraita, but it will be asur d'rabanan, a clean garment. Even though it's not soiled, if you soak it in water, you may come to squeeze. You may come to sechita. Therefore, it's asur d'rabanan. But the av melacha, the original melacha, is to actually take that soiled garment, it's soiled, it's dirty, or the wool, and remove the dirt from it by using water. And we're going to talk about the process of it in a moment, how that is done. It can be done in several ways. But before we go to that, let's just remember that melaben, the isur applies to any bad, to any garment. Garment does not necessarily mean something you wear. It could even be the shatiach. You cannot wash the carpet. Right? It could also be your mizron, your mattress. It could also be threads, ropes. You cannot wash it. Right? If it's made from a type of bad that is absorbent. Therefore, what about things that are not absorbent, like glass, metal, porcelain? We're allowed to wash the dishes, can't we? Why? Because there's no melaben on these items. You're not really removing anything that has been absorbed in them. The real isur of melaben is to remove dirt that has been absorbed in what? In something that is absorbent, like clothing, like garments. Glass is not absorbent, so there's no melaben when you wash it. Yes. A sponge? No. A sponge, we'll talk about that soon. That's a problem of sechita, right? Squeezing. Okay, so when we talk about libun, the prohibition even applies to one stain. If somebody has a stain on his suit, on his dress, on her dress, you can't put a little bit of water on it to remove that stain. That a libun applies even to one stain. Even if the rest of the shirt, of the top, of the dress is still dirty. All you did was a half an inch square. It's still asur. No, you can't ask a goy to do so either. Remember the rule, whatever you can't do, usually you can't ask a goy to do. Except for the few exceptions where the rabbis allowed us to use a goy. So this would be libun, removing a stain by applying some water. Alright, in order to understand libun a little bit better, we need to see how libun occurs. Libun can occur in one of three ways. Shriya, soaking it. In the olden days, they didn't have wash machine, right? How did you wash clothes? You soaked it in water overnight, I think, 24 hours. You could have put detergent in there too. But even without detergent, the soaking in water itself accomplishes libun. It cleanses the clothing from some of the dirt or all of the dirt. Maybe not all the stains, but it definitely makes that shirt or that dress better than it was before. So if there is an improvement, that's called libun. And that improvement can occur through shriya, shipshuf, and srita. Shriya means by soaking. So we can't soak a shirt in water. Something that's soaked. You can't apply water to the stain to remove it. That's a form of shriya. Whether it's a lot of water or a little water makes no difference. Same effect. And you can't be mishafshef. Mishafshef means to scrub, right? To use the same shirt to scrub itself to remove that stain. Can't do that either, because that is a form of libun. Because it has the same effect. You're cleaning the garment. And you cannot squeeze. The effect of squeezing the water, extracting the water out from the beged is a form of libun. It makes that beged cleaner. You are extracting the dirt, you're extracting the water, you're extracting that which you do not want. Okay, so as a result of these three that are forms of libun, we need to see how they are applied in real life. Hartavat beged. Hartavat beged means you just want to put some water on a cloth for whatever reason, not to clean it necessarily. Let's say you want to dust some furniture. There's no issue to dust furniture on Shabbat. The reason why we don't dust furniture on Shabbat is because it's a uvda dechol. It's something you do during the week. And something that you do during the week you don't do on Shabbat, even if it's not a sur. But let's say you want to, put some water on a beged. You're not soaking it, right? You're not cleaning it. It's not necessarily dirty. The only problem with doing that would be is that if you put water on a beged, you may come to sechita. You may come to squeezing it. So that is why we do not soak or we do not put water on a cloth. Even if it's not to clean the cloth itself, for some other application, because one may come to be sochet. So this would be a sum midrabanan. Okay, how do you call it? A compress. A compress. Let's say you want to put a cold towel, a wet towel on someone. There's a problem with this. Okay, sick or whatever. Right? What's the problem with that? You may come to the sechita. There's no necessarily shriya. There may not be shriya, let's say. You're not soaking it, right? But you may come to squeeze it. If you compress it too hard, that may be a problem. The best type of compress, if you need to use some compress, is to use paper. Because with paper, the rabbis are much more lenient. It's not a real sechita, it's something which is disposable. You don't care to remove the water from the paper. Because when do we remove water? We remove water from a garment that you want to clean. You're not as concerned with paper. And because of that, it may be easier to use paper than to use some cloth or some smartut, some rag, and the like. Okay, before we come to discussing a little bit more in detail sechita, I want to talk about a little bit more about the shipshuf. When we talk about shipshuf or scrubbing, it could be one or two ways. It could be with one's hand, you cannot scrub, or to use the garment itself. Scrubbing, regardless of how you do it, is a sur. Now, if you have some dirt on your shoes, you're allowed to remove it with a cloth. You just have to be careful, as we discussed when we spoke about tochen, not to be meshafshef any hard dirt, whether it's on your shoe or whether it's on your beged, on your garment, because if it's already hardened, the dirt, and you use a knife, then you are tochen, you are grinding it. So once mud has hardened, whether it's on a garment or whether it's on a shoe, don't use a knife, don't be meforeh, don't grind it up. Don't, there's another word for it. What? Don't break it up. Right. The best thing to do with dirt or mud on the shoe is to go to the sidewalk and remove it, cement on the sidewalk, not with your, like this, it comes off, it came off in that way, not through your hand. What? Yeah, you can remove it that way too, but you cannot use a knife to break it up. I'm going to talk about that. That's the last item. What do you do with stain? That's the last item. Yes. No, not really. A little bit. We're not dealing with mixing in the paste. Right. Okay, schita. Schita means squeezing. You cannot squeeze on Shabbat. We spoke about squeezing fruit, which was an issue that had to do with dash, the melacha of dash. Right? Dash is removing the kernels from the wheat itself, from the stalk itself, breaking up, right? Threshing, ladush, right? So the sechita of perot, of certain fruits that one makes juice from, like grapes, was more of an issue of dash. That's not the sechita of gadim, of garments. They're very different. One is a form of mefarek. Ani mefarek, I am extracting the juice from the fruit, which is asur unless it's like a lemon that I squeeze into a salad or a tea. Otherwise, we don't make fruit juice on Shabbat by squeezing them, because either it's asur midoraita or it's asur midarabanan, depending on if it's ordinarily made into juice or not. Nevertheless, you can't just squeeze it because it's a form of dash. Here we're talking about schitat begadim. There's no dash, it's not food. The squeezing a garment is a problem because it's melaben, it's a form of libun, it's a form of cleansing the garment. Therefore we can't use a sponge on Shabbat because it's a sechita. What do you do if there's a spill of water on a table or on the floor? If it's on the table, just put a lot of paper. Remember, paper is less of a problem. Just be careful not to squeeze the paper. I mean, if a little bit squeeze, don't squeeze, but then take the paper and throw it away. If you have a very, very big towel and you have a small spill in that big towel, it's going to easily absorb it, and there's no problem with sechita. Of course, you can use the big towel. The real problem is usually with small towels, small rags, with a large spill of water. If you absorb all of that, you can easily come to squeezing. That you can't do. So if you can remove the water from the table somehow, you can do that. But you cannot apply a small rag to that large of a spill. You can't use a mop for the same reason on the floor, but you can use a big shmata, right? A big smartut, a big rag. What you should not use is a beged. Let's say you say, I'm just going to use my shirt, then I'm going to wash my shirt. No, because since it's a shirt you wear, we're concerned you may come to sechita. You're concerned about your shirt. However, if it's one of those old shirts that you already made into a shmata, anyway, then you can use it anyway, because we're not concerned. You're not going to squeeze it out. So if it's big enough, it's a spill on the floor, you can use that to cover it up, and that's okay. Alright, just like there's a problem of cleaning one's garment, one should not clean the carpet thoroughly on Shabbat from all the crumbs. If there's big pieces on the carpet that you can easily pick up, that's fine. But to start removing and brushing the carpet, to scrub it well to remove it, that we cannot do, because that is also a form of libun, whether it's a garment or whether it's a carpet, we said before. It doesn't have to be water. In this case, the brushing, removing all the dirt that is absorbed in the carpet, can be considered like libun. Therefore, we don't get on our knees and clean the whole carpet on Shabbat. Big pieces is okay. Big pieces is not a problem. Okay, the last items are the most difficult problem. What do you do if you get dirt on yourself? Cleaning your clothing from avak, from dust, from lint, or stains, cholent, or some other thing, ketchup. What do you do? These are the more difficult situations. Most opinions are that you cannot clean any dust from a new garment or a garment that you are very much makpid that it should always be clean, especially black garments, that any dust is recognizable. Dust on a hat, dust on a garment, you have to be very careful. You can't blow it away, you can't just remove it. That's a form of libun. You can't shake it off easily. You can ask a goy to do so if it's important for you to look right, but it's very, very dirty and so forth. So dust on a hat, dust on a suit is a problem. And make sure that you don't put it in a place where it's going to get dusty. That's all, the rabbis tell us, if you don't want to run into this problem. However, with stains, it works a little bit different. Ketchup, cholent that falls on your shirt, you of course can remove that piece that is still there, that dirt. You're not doing any melaben by just removing what's there. The problem is what has been absorbed, not what's on the surface. What has been absorbed, you cannot, a little bit of wine, a little bit of oil, you cannot put water, as we said before. The little bit of water is libun. But even if you don't apply water, even if you just try to rub it out, you can't rub it off. What? No. What you can do is from the inside, from the inside you can't, use the bat itself, the garment itself, to rub it off, take it off. But from the inside, if you push on it and it falls out, that's fine. You can use a knife if you can easily remove the top surface. That's okay. However, once this goo, I think they call it, right, has hardened, and if you remove it, right, nothing will remain there. You can't remove it. The only time you can remove this garbage is if there's a stain there. The reason why this works is because if there's a stain, then what we consider the rest of the garbage that's on top is considered to be on the surface, not absorbed. See, you cannot remove something which is absorbed, because that causes a libun to the garment. If it's on the surface, you can remove it with a knife. You can take a shmata and remove it, as long as you don't use water. The problem is if that goo that was once absorbed in a sense, right, like any paste or any even gum. If you pull all of it, you're removing part of what's been absorbed in the garment. That's called libun. So therefore, even if it is hardened, you can't remove it because that will be considered a libun for that beged. So of course, if you catch it right away, it's fine. Otherwise, you have to ask a goy or wear something else. So it becomes a little complicated when you're dealing with stains, whether it's from a baby vomiting on you, or whether it's from cholent spilling on you, from the male. It becomes a very big problem because the most you can do is to use a dry cloth just to wipe away a little bit that's on the surface, but not what's absorbed. That which is absorbed, there's no way to remove that. Not by scrubbing, with using a garment, not by using a knife, not by doing anything. Yes? Makes a difference. Once something is absorbed, any form of removing that which is absorbed is a libun to that beged. On Shabbat, you can't be milaben, you can't clean, you can't take it to the laundry, you can't soak it, you can't scrub it, you can't squeeze it. Anything that will bring out that dirt would be asur. Exactly. There's nothing you can do to remove that or change. No, a goy can't touch it unless it's with the dust. If it's a big problem, you can ask a goy with the dust. The dust is a drop more lenient, but we're strict with dust too because our opinion as a whole that removing even a little bit of dust is considered a form of libun, especially if you care about it. If you don't care, it's an old shirt, an old suit, a little bit of dirt, and you just remove it like that without a brush, of course. We're never talking about removing it with a brush, but even with your hand, it could be a problem. But if it's something that you don't care about, if it's a little dirty, if it's old, it's not new, then you could do it. The problem is that most of the clothing we wear on Shabbat is almost like new because you wear it once a week. So you do care that it be kept clean. So you have to be careful with dust or with any stain not to remove it. But with the dust, you can ask a goy. There's a lot of it. Okay, all of these are forms of libun, and we'll talk a little bit more about some additional applications of libun 2 weeks from now. As I said, for those of you who are not here next, there are a few additional applications that we don't have time to go over today, and then I'm going to leave for 2 weeks. Yeah. That's what we're going to be talking about 2 weeks from now. What happens if it gets soaked in the rain? Or what happens if you have, like I tell you right now, if you have a lot of snow on it? You don't just shake it off from the snow. That also is a form of like shaking off or removing the dust, which is a form of, you just leave it till after Shabbat. But the application of the situation that you mentioned of being soaked in water, putting it to dry, even though I briefly spoke about that, we'll talk about that again 2 weeks from now, and how to do it. There's something called derech lifluf, but if you are using the garment, a cloth or something to clean something that's spilled, something that's dirty, even though it's becoming soaked, you're not causing libun to that garment because that's called derech lifluf. You are cleaning dirt. You're not cleaning the cloth itself. Libun is cleaning the cloth itself. That is what your concern is. That's your interest. Cleaning up some dirt on the table, right? Chocolate milk that's spilled. That's called derech lifluf. That is something which is permissible. So even though it appears to be that you're getting this water, this liquid absorbed into this cloth, it will be permissible. As long as, of course, you're careful with sefika. So that will cover with Hashem 2 weeks from now. We have a few additional points left in Libun before we go on to the next melachot. We're dealing with melachot that have to do with garments, and we're going to get into a very interesting area of knots, undoing knots, and the whole process of how to sew. The loom, the weaving, and all that. And that is a little technical, and I'm going to get some pictures to show you how the process works and what exactly was prohibited by the Torah. Because it's very detailed, very technical. And these things we come across with every day, we understand them a little bit better. But there are some melachot that are a little bit more difficult to explain. So maybe I'll see if I can get a hold of some pictures or some transparency to show. But that's all part of the garment preparation process. The weaving, the tearing, the cleaning, right? Laundering, bleaching, it's all the same. Yeah. Okay. כן, נכון, דיברנו על זה, כן. מבפנים אפשר לדחוף את זה החוצה. כן, בחוץ אי אפשר. You cannot do it whether you're rubbing the suit itself, or whether you're removing it with your hand, or blowing in it. Yes. Right, if it's on the surface, remember, if something is on the surface, then there's no problem removing it. The big problem is when something has been absorbed. That's really the issue. Something that's absorbed, once you remove it, it's a form of libun. Even though you didn't use water.